Hello and welcome everyone to another biology class of Fun Scholar. So I, Shushmita ma'am, am going to explore another topic for you, that is conservation of plants and animals. This is the chapter for CBSE class 8. So first of all, in this chapter, we'll learn about the term conservation, the difference between conservation and preservation, and then we will know about the various protected areas with national park, wildlife sanctuary and biosphere reserves, and what are their key features, and then we will also know about some of the topics relevant to conservations such as red data book, migration and so on and so forth. So let's begin. So conservation. Conservation is understanding the need to protect biodiversity for sustainable future. Why is it called so? Because for that we need to know about conservation and its definition. Conservation states that it is the protection and management of the different species, be it the plant species or the animal species, the ecosystem, the habitats of those species, and along with the protection, the management of all these things, and then sustainable development also. So that means conservation does not state that all these resources cannot be utilized for the development of the human being on a large scale. But the thing is that it prohibits the exploitation and depletion of such natural resources. And then what is its difference with preservation? Preservation basically means to actually maintain the integrity and authenticity of something in its original state and not to disturb it at any cost. But conservation doesn't say so. So, for example, if I say that any heritage site is protected, so that means it will not be touched with any human intervention. The pristine nature will be preserved and there will be no development, no cleaning action and no renovation and nothing. It will be maintained in the original form for long days or for generations maybe until unless its status is changed. But if it is conserved, then what we'll do, we'll clean up the surrounding area, put up a boundary, then renovate the areas which need the renovation, and then it will be opened up for human interaction, means for the humans to come and have a visit, understand the importance of such heritage sites. So, and also maybe generate revenue from that visits. So, the heritage site on one hand is being protected, is being managed, and on the other side it is also being utilized to generate revenue, and that revenue can be utilized for the good purpose of the development, right? So preservation means just maintaining the originality, nothing else. But in conservation it is a broader aspect where we try to protect it and also we try to manage it along with maintaining the sustainable development that can happen from its utilization, or we can say judicial utilization. Okay, so now we'll move forward. So here is the list of content where we'll understand about deforestation, the consequences, the protected areas. So since I have already talked about conservation, now let's watch this video and try to understand the idea better.
Have you heard your grandparents being nostalgic about the past? They say things like, earlier there used to be trees here, or we would wake up to the sound of birds. Now, can you tell me why this isn't a reality anymore? For starters, we could blame ourselves for wanting huge buildings and wide roads. When has the natural cover of forests disappeared? In truth, we have cut down all those trees in the name of development. Can you tell me what this process is called when many trees and plants are cut out? Yes, we call it deforestation. Clearing up forests for human benefit is called deforestation. Can you name a few reasons why man clears up forest lands? Agriculture, that's right. We clear land to bring more land under cultivation. What other reasons can you think of? Yes, for building factories, houses, and roads. And what about cutting trees for wood and fuel? Isn't that another reason? Of course it is. Man has cut trees over the years, and do you know this very action has caused some serious reaction? Yes, we call them consequences. We cannot get away by reducing the green cover on our planet. Trees and plants are a part of an ecological chain and they maintain a specific balance. Let us see how many deforestation consequences you are able to identify from the following pictures. You can now imagine the extent of consequences deforestation has, can't you? Let us look at each of these in a little more detail. Trees and plants give out oxygen and use carbon dioxide during photosynthesis. With reduced plants and trees, the level of carbon dioxide on the earth is increasing. Carbon dioxide cannot escape into space, and like many other harmful gases, it is creating a blanket of heat around the earth. This increasing heat has led to a famous phenomenon known as global warming. This is the cause of the increase in the temperature of the earth. Do you know that according to studies, the last few decades of the 20th century have been hottest in the last 400 years? This can create a chain of events. High temperatures affect the water cycle. Glaciers melt at an alarming pace. Soil cannot hold excess water during rainfall or even rise in sea level. Both these events can cause floods. On the other hand, any change in the water cycle can also lead to droughts. Haven't you noticed the erratic climate changes in your area? These are all results of deforestation. Let us see how the water table is affected due to deforestation. Trees and plants have roots which hold the soil and allow water to percolate into the soil. With trees around, water does not run off carrying away with it the topsoil. This means that the absence of trees would cause increased soil erosion, removal of topsoil layer, and reduced underground water levels. Soil that is devoid of its top layer is infertile, and gradually open lands become deserts. This process is called desertification. Land that had once harbored rich trees and wildlife now remains a desert devoid of all life. What about pollution? As already stated, increased release of harmful gases has caused global warming. This pollutes the air around us. It is therefore evident that all consequences are interrelated. Rampant cutting down of trees will only add to more problems around us. What can we do to prevent this? Can we repair the damage done? To know more, watch our next video.
So from this video, we have basically learned about the severe consequences of deforestation, and now subsequently we'll also see how we can tackle those consequences and we can reverse the damage already done. So now coming back to the conservation and the population of plants and animals that we are talking to conserve here. Now for that we must know about biodiversity. So what is biodiversity actually? Biodiversity is the variety of life forms found in the biosphere. Variety means, for example, we have so many life forms of animal, so many life forms under the plants, so many species, so many genera, so many varieties. So all are included under biodiversity. So the variety or the number of different populations of species that we see in our area. So if we consider that on a global basis or in the biosphere, so that includes the biodiversity. So biodiversity, it helps maintain ecosystem balance, but is threatened by human activities like deforestation and pollution, about which we have just now watched in the video. So coming directly to the topic of deforestation. What is deforestation? Deforestation, we know from the term, D means clearing or removing, or you can say making it devoid of forest. So deforestation simply means removing, clearing or making the land devoid of forest. And since forests are made up of trees and the different life forms of plants, so that means clearing of all the forms of life under plant category to actually clear the land for different purposes such as industrialization, urbanization, and other commercial uses such as making roads, highways, flyovers, etc. So the trees are cut down and they are totally removed, and hence it has got direct impact on the biodiversity. The first impact is that there is loss of habitat. The immediate effect, if I say, of deforestation is loss of habitat. We know that different categories of animals, be it the arboreal animals or the aerial animals, they depend on trees for both living and for their food. So definitely the forest is home for them, and suddenly it is removed. So loss of habitat will also lead to depletion of animal life, because if they don't have food or shelter for living, then obviously the animal life is going to perish. So let's talk about deforestation causes and consequences. Under causes, we have natural causes also that can lead to deforestation, such as the forest fires. What happens when the leaves are dried up? Then in the summer season, if they brush aside each other, then due to this friction, there is spark, and then fire ignites and the fire spreads. The entire forest is then under the wrap of fire, because in the hot and dry condition we see that the whole forest, suddenly we have already seen the forest fire of Australia, and in that case so many animal lives were jeopardized. Similarly, in forest fires, the same thing happens. It's a natural cause because this is due to the extreme heat. But we can also say this natural cause is the indirect effect of deforestation only, because for deforestation, since deforestation is not a local but a global phenomenon, so the rising temperature is also indirectly the effect of deforestation only, for which forest fire and the dried out leaves, they are the raw materials which then react and then cause the forest fire. None less to mention, the entire forest is destroyed. And then severe droughts. That is also an indirect effect of the deforestation process. So severe drought also lead to, so this is like a cyclic process, a vicious cycle you can say. So deforestation, then the impact will again lead to more deforestation. So this is a vicious cycle, and this cycle can only be broken by planting trees or afforestation or reforestation, about which we will talk subsequently. Now, for severe droughts also there is lack of or severe scarcity of water. So the plants and the trees, they cannot get water for their survival. They dry out and they die. Now, for anthropogenic causes that are caused due to human activities, as I already mentioned earlier, clearing of land for commercial purpose or for agricultural purpose. So those are the reasons for deforestation. Now coming to the consequences, you have already watched in the video. The first consequences will be the increase in the greenhouse gas. Now the greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, they have the capacity to capture the sunlight and then trap the heat, and the heat, if it remains trapped in the atmosphere, it will lead to the rise in the temperature as a whole of the whole world or the earth. Therefore, carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas, so increase in its concentration in the atmosphere will lead to more global warming, because it will lead to capturing of the heat of the sun more. Then reduced rainfall, because it will hamper the water cycle. We know that there is a process through which plants release the water in the form of vapor, that is known as transpiration process. So that also contributes to the water cycle. So if there are no trees and plants, definitely that will have an impact on water cycle and the rainfall pattern. Then soil fertility will also be lost. As said in the video, the soil will become loose because the roots of the plants, they won't be able to hold the soil or bind the soil, and then the top layer will be washed away due to water and wind, leading to soil infertility. And this top layer has got the humus, that means the layer of organic matter. So if the top layer is washed away, the soil becomes very infertile, and slowly this soil will be very much unfit for any kind of production or plantation, and it will lead to desertification. The whole land will be rendered barren, and the barren land will ultimately turn into a desert. Now, impact on water cycle and soil erosion already discussed, and then the gradual conversion of fertile land to deserts, we have already now discussed about that. Causes of deforestation: the logging, then the illegal felling down of the trees, then the climate change, which, as I said, it is a vicious cycle. It is the impact of deforestation and also the cause of further deforestation. Mining activities, the mining activities, they actually, for that, especially the open cast mining activities, a huge land area is cleared, and for that deforestation is the ultimate result. Agriculture, for growing of the food crops for the ever growing population, agriculture needs land for which forests are cleared. Then definitely infrastructure and other commercial purposes. So these include the main causes of deforestation. Talking about the consequences, we know, as I said, droughts, it is the consequence as well as the cause of deforestation. So if trees are not there, water percolation capacity will be hampered, and if water does not percolate, the groundwater table will be reduced, and if the groundwater table is reduced, then the soil will become, you can see the cracks on the soil surface, the soil becomes very dry, the water holding capacity is reduced due to soil erosion of the top layer and the reduction of moisture in the soil due to the reduction in the water table. So together, all these two things together, that is soil erosion and reduction in the water percolation capacity, together leads to droughts. Then desertification I have already talked about. Affect animals, definitely, as I said, the habitat and the food resource both are lost, definitely then the animal life will perish. Then floods, we know if there is global warming, which is the direct impact of deforestation, there will be increase in temperature. Now flood will be caused by two ways. Number one, global warming will lead to melting of the glaciers, the sea level and the level of water in the rivers, all everywhere it will increase, and then it will overflow its banks. And secondly, due to deforestation, the soil will not be bound by the roots. So then the soil will be washed away, and then the soil will get deposited on the beds of the rivers and the ponds, and slowly the water level will increase and overflow its banks. So either way, it will lead to floods. Now we'll watch another video regarding forest and the stakeholders of forest.
Have you ever taken a train journey along a coastal belt? Or even the interiors of a rain-fed state? Mark my words, the scene is breathtaking. Ever wondered how the forests are home to so many animals and birds? These forests are called as biodiversity hotspots. What do I mean by hotspots? These are areas that contain a wide variety of species of living things. They are under a threat. What threat can these beautiful forests face? As you know, humans are the biggest threat to the forests. The various activities of deforestation, grazing, industrialization, and urbanization have reduced the forest cover. Reduced forest cover would lead to loss of many species. We have already studied in lower grades how life is interdependent. The food chain and food web need all its components. Even if one is affected by human activities, the ecological balance is disturbed. But why do humans need to encroach upon the territories of the plants and animals? Why are forests facing a threat from us? The answer is a simple four-letter word: need. And thus, forests face a threat. Humans are dependent on the forests. As we know, plants are the producers of food, and we are at the top of the food chain. We need the forests and its produce. Who all do you think are related to the forests? Who can be termed as the stakeholders of the forests? Firstly, the people who live in the very forests are completely dependent on the forests. They need it for their living space, their food, clothing, and every other basic requirement. Who owns these forests? Surely the people who live there do not own the whole forest. The forest departments or the government owns the forest land. Once someone has the ownership, it is bound to be sold or rented out for profit. The industrialists use the forest for the raw materials needed for production of goods. And lastly, we have certain individuals and institutions that help protect the forest. They are called as the conservationists. Let us look at the stakeholders once again: the people who live, the government, industrialists, and the conservationists. But do all these damage the forests? Are all these stakeholders a threat? Of course not. The people who live, the government and the conservationists do not harm the forests. Their use of the forest is sustainable. Let us see how this holds true in the case of the locals. Can a small group of forest dwellers use up all the wood for burning or cooking? Would the cattle eat up all the fodder of the forest in a short time? Seems hilarious, doesn't it? That's because this cannot be so. Villagers use the forest at a rate that is very slow. There is enough time for the fodder to grow back or new twigs to grow before the villagers use the same plot again. They use the forests for their survival. The forest department and the conservationists, on the other hand, only play a part in protecting the forests. They generally do not directly utilize any resources as such from these forests. Who then is a threat to the forests? The industrialists. They use the forest for revenue. This commercialization makes their income straight towards the environment, thus leading to damaging activities. When the industrialists need wood for making a huge number of benches, they will use huge machines to cut down the trees. Once they have done so, the forest will take years to grow those back. Why do you think the industrialists don't care about this? Simple enough. They have many more forests to cut, and it's not their goal, unlike the locals who have just the forest they live in. How do the locals help preserve the forest then? We will have a look at some interesting ways they employ in our next video.
So from this video, we have learnt about four types of stakeholders that forests usually have. One is the local people who use the forest for dwelling and for surviving. And then we have the government and the conservationists who protect the forest and prohibit the illegal activities, as well as they check that the use of the forest is sustainably done and not exploited beyond the limit. But only the industrialists, that is the group which are harming the forest. The industrialists do not care about the forest being exploited at an extreme level. We have already heard about the Hyderabad forest case, and then these are only a few examples. But for many years, when the industrialization or urbanization have started, from then only this is going on. But now, due to the social media, it's creating a buzz, but otherwise it is going on for many years. So it's the responsibility not only of the local people or the government or the conservationist or the industrialist solely, but it is the shared responsibility of all to protect the forest, because from that we get so many things, right from the timber to the medicine to the food and so on and so forth. The list is so long. So if we cut down the forest, then the all the resources, so the supply will be stopped all at once. But if we want to get the continuous sustainable supply, then we need to use the resources, as said in the video, give time for the replenishment of the sources that have been used, and then again we can continue the uses. This idea is very much the core of sustainable development, which is directly linked to the idea of conservation. Now, conservation can be done with the help of protected areas also, that we'll see now in this video. The protected areas, for which I have already talked in the beginning, such as the Biosphere Reserve, the Wildlife Sanctuary, and the national parks. These are the areas which the government has set up in order to check the extinction and endangerment of the species of animals, or that means of either the flora or the Fauna, because as we know, in biodiversity there is relationship among all the biotic and abiotic factors. If a single group of organism is extinct, then the impact will be on all the other organisms who are directly or indirectly linked to that group of organism. So let's watch the video regarding the protected areas.
Did you know that forests and wildlife are interrelated? I'm sure you do. Forests are home to a variety of wildlife, including birds, animals, and even the tiniest microbes. What happens when we cut down trees? Well, we are unhoming the wildlife that is dependent on these forests. What exactly are we snatching away from them? In scientific terms, we are attacking the biosphere. Biosphere is the sphere of the earth in which the living organisms exist and the sphere that supports life. What happens when we attack this very support system? The answer is obvious. We are putting everyone's lives at risk. Whose lives am I talking about? Yes, the innumerable living organisms in the biosphere. They constitute the biodiversity of the environment. What do we mean by the term biodiversity? Biodiversity constitutes the number of living organisms like plants, animals, and even microbes that exist on Earth. These organisms are also interrelated and have a close relationship with the environment. For example, microbes increase the fertility of the soil. The plants depend on soil, sun, and air. Humans depend on plants and animals. Humans also need water and air for survival. Can you see how each one is connected and dependent on the earth? Well, these diverse life forms in the biosphere constitute the biodiversity of the earth. Now tell me, do you think that the biodiversity of one region can be different from another? Think about it. Do we find penguins near the equatorial regions? Of course not. Similarly, we will not find trees of the equatorial region surviving near the poles. Thus, we can say that the biodiversity of one region is varied and distinct from that of another. Why do we find such differences? Plants and animals can grow and survive only in specific temperatures and climatic conditions. That is why their habitats are region specific. How do we protect animals and plants in their habitats? For that, let me introduce you to the concept of protected areas. What exactly are protected areas? Governments of various countries mark certain areas as protected. And which areas are included in this? Those which are rich in biodiversity or even have animals and plants that are threatened. You know how many such areas can be marked? There are three of them. Sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, and national parks are the names of the three types of protected areas. What is the difference between them? Why are these areas termed as protected areas? How are they protected? We will answer all these questions in detail in our next video.
This was the introductory video about protected areas. From this video, we have understood protected areas mean that in those areas, the wildlife or the natural flora will be protected. And how it will be done and what is the difference that we will discuss now. So you can see three types of protected areas are there: wildlife sanctuary, national park and biosphere reserve. Let's discuss a bit, then we'll go into watching the video which will show you the details about each one of them. So firstly, let's talk about wildlife sanctuary. Wildlife sanctuary aims to protect wildlife as the name suggests. The wildlife, it can include a particular species. For example, it can include the species of all the life forms or the endemic species which are found in that area particularly as a whole. So all the species of wildlife together, and there you can carry out some activities such as tourism, and there you can go and visit those animals, but for restricted time period. For example, 2 hours or 3 hours in the morning, and then 1 to 2 hours in the evening, like this. And it can be owned by the government or private agency, or they can own it jointly also. Coming to the national park is a way, it encompasses a very large area, and it aims to protect, or I will say it aims to conserve the flora and the fauna in its natural habitat. So it will ensure that the natural habitat or the ambience as found in the forest or in the open area, so that is protected. And here human intervention is strictly prohibited. These are owned completely by the government, and they are managed by the government officials only. You cannot go visit or disturb the animals or do any type of sustainable activities also. There the entry is strictly prohibited apart from the authorized government officials. Last but not the least, Biosphere Reserve. Biosphere Reserve's main idea is to integrate conservation with sustainable development and community participation. Here you will find three zones are there. The core zone, where the entry of the humans is strictly prohibited, no activities are allowed. And then we have the buffer zone, where you can carry out the research and some of the activities such as visiting the wildlife from that zone, that is the buffer zone. And then we have the transition zone, where sustainable practices such as sustainable agriculture, then timber collection, then collection of some of the food from the forest or medicinal herbs as collected by the local people, those activities are allowed. Biosphere reserves, in terms of the area, is the largest and can include some national parks and wildlife sanctuary in under its zone, and it is also owned by the government only. We all know that Nilgiri, the Biosphere Reserve, which is situated in Tamil Nadu, it is very famous. There you will find varieties of life forms, very exotic life forms, as well as some exotic plant species also. Now, to summarize, wildlife sanctuary can be owned by private company or the government or jointly owned, and it aims to protect the wildlife mainly. Here you can carry out activities such as tourism or going to visit them in the time that is regulated by the authority. In the national park, it aims to conserve not only the wildlife sanctuary but the flora and the fauna in its natural habitat as it is found in the forest or in the natural ecosystem. Here it is owned by the government, and no human activity is allowed. You cannot go and visit the animals or disturb them in any way. Lastly, Biosphere Reserve encompasses the largest area among all the three, and it can include many national parks and wildlife sanctuaries under its zone. It has got three areas, namely core zone, buffer zone, and transition zone. In the core zone, It is protected only for the flora and the fauna. Here you cannot carry out any human activity. In the buffer zone, you can carry out only some of the research activity for education purpose, and in the transition zone, sustainable human practices such as agriculture, collection of timber, food, medicinal herbs only are allowed. So we'll now see the video regarding all three of them.
In the previous video, we have taken a glance at what exactly wildlife sanctuaries and national parks are. Now let us move towards the third type of protected area, which is very interesting. But tell me one thing, why is this protected area the most interesting of the three? The answer will leave you amazed. This area does not just protect the natural flora and fauna of an area, it actually protects an entire ecosystem and its human culture as well. Yes, you heard me right. Biosphere reserves provide protection to indigenous tribes of the region as well. So, how exactly can we describe a biosphere reserve? It is a reserve which is a vast land containing either a terrestrial or a coastal ecosystem. Did you know that a biosphere reserve can even have a national park and a wildlife sanctuary within it? Yes, a biosphere reserve is only a protected territory. For example, the Panchmari Biosphere Reserve consists of one national park named Satpura and two wildlife sanctuaries named Gori and Panchmari. Can you guess how many biosphere reserves we have in India? There are 18 biosphere reserves found in India. Let us look at the biosphere reserves in some more detail. These areas have endemic species that harbor in them. What do we mean by endemic species? They are species that are found in a particular area. In other words, some species of plants and animals are found only in a particular region inside the biosphere reserve. A particular plant or animal may be endemic only to a zone, area, region, or country. These species are closely dependent on the environment. Do you know what happens when some foreign species are added to the zone? Yes, the endemic species will be threatened. They can even cause vast damage to the endemic species. Biosphere reserves are therefore very complex protected areas. They do not only help the flora and fauna, but also help protect the culture of a region. Now I'm sure you know the difference between the three protected areas. Have you heard something called a red data book? Yes, this book is used to record the names of all the endangered species. There are two different books for plants and animals. Why do we need to record the names of these species? The main reason is to ensure that proper care and prompt action is taken to save these species from extinction. There is another tiny aspect we need to look at before we conclude this lesson. Have you heard about migratory birds? These birds move out of a region when the climate or seasons change. These birds fly long distances when their habitat becomes extremely cold and inhospitable. They fly for laying eggs or merely for survival. How are these related to our protected areas? Well, our protected areas are the very ones that provide shelter to these migratory birds. Seems like the protected areas do serve various purposes. In our next lesson, let us look at some other ways in which we can conserve and protect our biosphere.
So as you can see, Now about national park, these are the areas where animals are protected from all kinds of disturbances to them and their habitat. You cannot do the deforestation process, you cannot hunt them, poach them illegally. Everything is strictly prohibited in that area. They are set aside to conserve the natural environment. This is very important. In national park, the natural environment is protected and the biodiversity is the prime concern in the national park along with the flora population. Examples are given here. Kaziranga National Park that protects mainly the one-horned rhino in Assam, we know. This is the map showing the national parks of India in all the states. You can see that in Ladakh we have got Hemis National Park. It is the largest national park. And in Andaman, the South Bottom Island National Park, it is the smallest. In West Bengal, we have Buxa, total 6 national parks: Sundarban, Jaldapara, Singalila, Neura Valley, Gorumara, and Buxa. So, different areas or different states contain so many national parks in India. You can count all of them in total. Talking about wildlife sanctuaries, these are areas reserved for wildlife where they can freely use the habitats and natural resources. The purpose is to protect specific wildlife species who face the extreme danger of extinction. Therefore, the wildlife sanctuary, the focus is there are other species present. As I said, the endemic species can definitely be present, but the focus mainly lies on a particular species or two who face the extreme danger of extinction. For example, in India, we have Pedian Wildlife Sanctuary in in Kerala, where elephants are protected and the other wildlife sanctuaries in different countries. Here again we have got the map of wildlife sanctuaries. The red dots, they denote the wildlife sanctuaries across India, you can see, and the star marks denote bird sanctuary. As you have watched in the video, the migratory birds, they also travel to India or to different places when there is adverse weather conditions for survival or for laying eggs, and then the bird sanctuaries are meant to protect those migratory birds. We have got a conference called Conservation of Migratory Species. This institution under Government of India protects the different migratory species. And for biosphere reserve, the purpose, as I told you, is to promote conservation and integrate it with sustainable development and community participation. The local people who live in and around the forest, they also participate in the process of biosphere conservation, and in turn, they get to use the resources from the forest. This is the map denoting the list of biosphere reserves across India. As I